Great. Thanks, Samira. It's always great to have that notification. Well, welcome everybody to our first Suffragette School training for 2024 for women candidates running and people working on their teams. So Labour Women are delighted to host this series of trainings for our candidates. And the aim is to be very practical and not take up too much of your time, because of course we know that everybody wants to be out there on the campaign trail and people have very busy lives. So what we want to do with these is practical insights to support your campaign. The first is on fundraising. I'm delighted to be joined today by Conor Power, our party treasurer, and Laura Harmon, the Labour Women fundraising officer and a candidate in the local elections. Emer Costello, former councillor, Lord Mayor and MEP, will be joining us later on as well to share some insights on fundraising. She's just a little bit delayed, so she'll be joining us in a while. So obviously you all just got that notification, but I'll say it for good form. We are recording this so that it can be used as a resource by other interested people within the party. So if there's anything that if you prefer not to be recorded, you can turn off your camera. But just so that everybody is aware of that. The other point I wanted to mention for candidates is that Labour Women have a candidate support fund that we use to support women running for election for the party. We will be sharing information about that fund in the weeks and months ahead. In February, we'll send some further details to our candidates and branches to make sure that everybody knows how to apply to the fund. So, without further ado, after having made those few housekeeping points, I'm going to hand over to Conor, who's going to give us an overview on the legal obligations on candidates and some guidance and rules that need to be followed in and around fundraising. Thanks very much, Conor. Over to you.
Well, thanks very much, Hannah. And hello, everybody. Happy New Year. And best of luck to everybody in the elections. And I'm sure you're all really busy at the moment. So first of all, everything I say, I have in writing, and I've circulated that to Hannah. And in fact, I might even amend the talk if there's any questions, I can answer them in this document as well. And the second thing to say is, if you do have any particular queries throughout the campaign about fundraising or about accounting or about returns, just get in touch. You can get in touch to me directly if you want, or via Hannah, or via Laura, or whoever, via the Billion headquarters, or any of that. So don't feel it's hard enough being a candidate. And these rules can be detailed, and people get concerned by the rules, rightly so. So if you do have any queries at all, make sure you send an email, drop a text, make a call, whatever you want. We're there and happy to help, and that applies to everybody. So just a few general things to note. There are spending limits, and there are donation limits, and you need to be aware of these. Many of you will be generally aware of it, and as I said, I have a document that will be more specific. The spend limit will depend on the population of your ward. If you're standing in a large ward with a population of over 35,000, then your spending limit is €13,000. If your population in your ward is between 18,000 people and 35,000 people, the spending limit is 11,500. And if the ward has 18,000 or less, then the spending limit is 9,750. Now, I think many of you would be delighted to be in a position to spend anything near that amount of money. So, just there are limits and there are targets, but good luck with that. We estimate that the minimum amount to spend on a local election campaign would be 2,500. Unfortunately, many of you will be spending more than that. And best of luck in fundraising, and I hope it all goes very well for you. Just to say, by default, 10% of that is allocated to the national party when you're a member of a party and you've been selected by a party. So in fact, those limits are the total limits, and the Labour Party will take 10% of that unless you agree otherwise in writing with the party. And that's just that can be done. And I'm going to speak to Billy about that, just maybe was in an email out about in general terms. But the default position is that of your spend limit, 10% goes to the political party. So in fact, your spend is 11,700, 10,350, or 8,775 for yourself, with the other 10% go to the party. And it's important not to breach those limits, not least because it'll have consequences, but also it's going to look bad. And the limits, The limits apply 60 days prior to polling day. I would take it as being applicable from now on if I were you. I wouldn't fall into a trap, because if you were to book posters, and posters often have to book in advance, I think they'll say they were deployed within the 60 days. So don't take the risk on paying for something now. It's matters that are deployed in the 60 days that are really important. Not that I think they'll breach those limits. And if you have queries about any issue like that, get in touch. It's important not to breach the limits. I'm sure you won't. So then that's the expenditure side. Spending money is the easy part, unfortunately. If you have it, getting it is the hard part. And there are also limits then on what donations you can bring in. So nobody can make a donation to you in excess of €1,000. If only they would make a donation of, up to €1,000, wouldn't that be great? But nobody can make a donation in excess of €1,000. And donations in cash are limited to €200. So a person can give you cash 200. You've got to note that. You've got to have a filing system in place. You've got to record who that person is for your own benefit. It doesn't have to be disclosed as such unless the local authority come looking for details afterwards. And these apply to candidates. And a candidate, by the way, it isn't just on polling day or the day the poll is announced by the Minister for the Environment. You're all candidates now if you've been selected. You declare yourself for election for a candidate at the local elections. You're a candidate. So these fundraising limits now apply to you. You should take that as being a position. The most tricky part sometimes is corporate donors. So a local business might want to give you some money, some fundraising help. Watch out for that. The most a corporate, as you say, a company can give you is €200 unless they followed particular internal rules, unless they're registered basically with the register of corporate donors, and almost nobody's done that. So watch out. That's in the past. The only donations I've ever had for return are corporate donors who've given over the relevant amount, depending on the election, who haven't registered for that. And so that's a problem. So if you have somebody with a business who's giving you from a business account, either ask it, tell them the business can only give you €200, and anything in excess of that, which would be greatly received, it has to come from a person. All right, that's the broad rule of thumb. There are ways around that if the company registers, but that's going to be difficult, and most people don't want to do that, and they'll run out of time to do it between now and the election anyway. So just don't bother. Is my rule of thumb on that. I'm not trying to be flippant about it, but it's just easier not to. So they're the basic rules. There's no limit on the amount of money you can, by the way, bring in. There's limits to what you can spend, but not what you can fundraise. But again, unfortunately, I don't think that's going to be a problem even if there were limits. Let's be honest about it. So, like I said, donations of €1,000 or cash €200. Anonymous donations. If somebody says money arrives at the post, here's 50 quid, that's okay. You cannot receive an anonymous donation that's more than €100. And you need to keep records of all this. X gave me Y amount at such and such a date, check received Y amount from such and such a person, anonymous donation, 50 quid, 20 quid, whatever. You've got to keep records of all this. And as regards fundraisers, you'll keep records of everybody who attended, and you'll have a gross amount, you'll have a net amount. And the fundraising is the net amount divided by the amount of people. And there's a list there as well. Other individuals, if you do have individuals who give you large amounts of money, they need to be careful about that, because there'll be an annual limit of what they can give to 2,500 to a range of persons in the party and the party itself. So they'll have to watch out for that. If you do have a particular benefactor who might be willing to support you, just watch out for that. You might get them in trouble. You won't. You can't take more than 1,000 for them, but if they were to give to a few people around the place, that might be difficulty for them. So you will have to keep record of donations. It's not that hard. It's nothing major as such, but your good accounting has to be kept. And similarly, receipts for your expenditures, they all have to be kept. And you have to make returns. You will have to make a return on the form. Every candidate will receive a form from the local authority. And you'll have to do that within 90 days of the election, whether you're successful or unsuccessful. If you're successful, and hopefully you all will be, you'll have other returns to make in the year following. By the 31st of January every year, you have to make returns as a councillor. And everybody on that as well, by the way, if a person does give you more than €600 of donation, you'll be disclosing that. So a person who gives €500, you'll have to note the donation, and you have to receipts and records, but the name of a person who gives more than €600 has to be recorded specifically. And some people like to know that, by the way. Finally, foreign donations. Well, again, this doesn't really apply to local elections too much, but you can't take donations from persons outside the state unless they're an Irish citizen. or unless it's a company that has a branch at least located here. I don't think that's really going to be an issue. It never really is for the Labour Party. That's more for other parties. I wonder who we're talking about there that do a lot of fundraising abroad, particularly in America. That might be relevant to them. It's not particularly relevant for us. But just in case, however, people are outside the country, just watch out for it. You never know with online fundraising. You might your online fundraiser will be aware of this, but you should be aware of it yourself. They have to be Irish citizens to be able to donate to resident abroad. Okay. So they're the basic rules, Hannah, and I don't want to overcomplicate it from that. And like I said, I have a document that can be shared, and I'm happy to take any questions on anything.
That's great, Conor. That's really helpful overview. I think, it's so important to make sure that everyone is compliant. Can I ask you a follow-up question? And then we'll jump into Brídín's question. You mentioned recording donations received at a fundraising event. So, for example, if candidates were to host a local fundraiser with a donation box at it, how do they record the donations received at that? Even if they have a list of attendees, they won't know exactly who put how much into the box.
Well, okay. Well, first of all, I mean, if that's cash, they're anonymous donations, so you got to be careful about that. But obviously, they came from somebody who attended, so they're not necessarily anonymous. You can't do it. I would not advise anonymous donations to be accepted at a fundraising event where you have a list of attendees.
Okay.
I wouldn't advise that. That's the first thing. But secondly, those donations, I mean, so a person might, for example, buy a ticket to attend a fundraising event or make a donation at the event itself. And you could actually take a split between donations that are made at an event. So somebody gives you a check at an event. Here's, good luck with your campaign. Here's a check for 50 quid or whatever. And also, buy a racehorse or spend money or buy a raffle ticket on the night in question. So I would tend to have a split. I would think the donation is a direct donation. And I would think the fundraise, it's the net proceeds from the fundraising aspect of that you divide up as part of the fundraiser.
So you divide it up by the number of attendees and assign an amount to each
for attendee? The net profit of the fundraiser. Yeah, for the net profit of the fundraiser. But if you get specific donations from people separate to that, even though it's at a fundraising event, you could take note of that as individuals giving their donation.
Great. Okay. Brídín, you had your hand up there. Do you want to jump in with a question for Conor?
Yeah, thanks so much. It's really interesting. Conor, if the branch has been saving money over the last couple of years and they now have over 2,500 saved, can you just use that, or how does that come into play?
So branches can buy. So I would avoid branches providing money directly to candidates, because we've fallen foul of that in the past, rather surprisingly, I thought, given that the party, including branches, for example, constituencies, they're all separate accounting units. And one of the thought was the money comes in a regulated way, it should be able to be spread around. But we've been caught by that before. And SIPO, on one occasion, deemed a cash payment from the party to a candidate to be a donation, which caused a huge difficulty, it has to be said. Mm-hmm. So the party there will be buying resources for the candidate, spending money.
So they can buy that kind of resource pack of the posters or something.
Correct. And be careful. That's what the assignment in writing in advance of the spend between the candidate and the party could be important. All right. So the candidate should assign a portion.
I'll have to look at that more.
Yeah, sure, no problem at all. So basically, so for example, if you have a ward of over 35,000 people, you're allowed to spend €13,000.
Yeah.
I mean, if the party is going to be spending, we'll say, €3,000 or €4,000 on that, the candidate and the party should agree that in advance. Say, I hereby allocate from my €13,000, I allocate €5,000 for expenditure to the party, and do that in writing and date it. That's all you have to do.
Okay, brilliant.
The default,
thanks so much.
Sorry, just to be clear then, Brídín, sorry. Yeah, I take it a level of detail there. If you don't do that by agreement as such, the default is 10%.
Yeah.
Okay, so you'd be limited to, the party be limited to spending 1,300 in that circumstance. So if you want to spend more than 1,300, you've got to have that separate agreement in place.
Okay. Thank you.
Is that clear enough, Brídín? Are you sure now?
Yeah. No, I'll look into it a bit more anyway. I need to see it in front of me, I think,
actually, sorry. There's a degree of generality, isn't there, when you're doing it in a talk like this? So I'm very happy if you come to me again with feedback or other questions when you're when you're in the middle of this process, and actually, to be perfectly honest with you, that'll help me explain things better, perhaps.
Thank you.
Okay, not at all. Thanks.
Thanks very much. We have a question in on the chat from Helen Barry, just asking around the spend limit for each candidate in an LEA.
Yeah, so again, like I said, it's for each candidate, the spending limit per candidate. If it's a large ward, if it's over 35,000 in population, the spend limit is €13,000 per candidate. That includes party and candidate. If it's between 18,000 people and 35,000 people, it's 11,500. And if it's 18,000 or less, then it's 9,750. And as I said, I have a document that will circulate those figures for you. I hope that answers the question. You're on mute there, Helen.
Yeah, no, thanks, Conor. Thanks. I'm on my phone because it's gone into a loop on my laptop. But so yeah, no, that's great. Thanks a lot.
No problem, Helen.
Okay, we might move on to Laura's piece now before going to Emer, and then if we have more questions for Conor, we can come back with those. So I'm going to just introduce Laura very briefly. So Laura is the fundraising officer of Labour Women, and she's also a candidate in the local elections. And Laura has experience around online fundraising from a number of other campaigns she's been involved in, not least running for the Seanad, but also civil society campaigns. And we asked Laura to speak on this point in particular because obviously I think it's a space where more and more candidates are looking to raise funds. It can be advantageous if you're reaching out to people who perhaps aren't based around you locally, but are connections of yours to support your campaign. There are a number of things to bear in mind. Obviously, the guidelines Conor has mentioned should be referenced in any communication that you make about this, because you don't want to accidentally exceed donation maximums. However, I think there's also an interesting piece for Laura to share around how to promote it, the kind of language to use, targets, and a few points to bear in mind to make your online fundraising as effective as possible. So Laura, thanks very much for taking the time, and over to you.
Thanks so much, Hannah. Thanks for having me, and thanks, Conor, for your presentation. I was asking Conor for some advice earlier as well on fundraising, so would encourage anyone to reach out to him. I'm sure he gets loads of calls, but it's great to have your expertise. I kind of just fell into this in terms of, I suppose, the fundraising piece, but I think it's probably something that any candidate, we all kind of need to become familiar with it in our own way. Personally, I hate asking people for money. I don't like having to fundraise, but unfortunately that is part of life as a candidate and being in politics. And I suppose the reality is that many of us will be outspent by opposition in other parties, so it is really necessary for us to do. And I think as well, particularly what's going on in the world at the minute with Palestine and wars and everything, and cost of living, it can be tough to be asking people for money when there's so many other things out there. But I think the reality is there are a lot of people that want to support you, a lot of people that want to see you do well. And there are some people that can't canvass for whatever reason, or they might live near you, as Hannah said, and they'd love to be able to support, by giving you some cash, essentially, which is a really meaningful, important way to support a campaign. So it's got to be done, basically. I guess my experience really is in terms of online fundraising. Look, I don't have a huge amount of experience, but yeah, I have ran for the Seanad twice and candidate now for the locals. And each of the 3 times I've done a GoFundMe, and I found that they've been very useful. So just, I suppose, in terms of the online campaigning, and I know people have had great success with events as well. Personally, I've organised table quizzes and stuff in the past, and I found that there was more work in it for the return. Now, having said that, if you can get someone that is willing to go off and organise something for you, then well and good, and I know people do really well out of those events. For me, I found that online has been more successful and kind of less work for the return, if that makes sense. So I guess in terms of online fundraising, firstly, I mean, there's a number of different platforms, but there's 2 kind of main ones that people seem to be using. I've used a GoFundMe page. It's online if you want to have a look at it. I mean, I'm not saying it's kind of like the perfect example or anything, but it's Laura Harmon for Cork City Council. And I've used that platform several times because I was comfortable with it. I know a lot of people are using iDonate now as well, and it's an Irish-based company as well. And again, it's similar idea. iDonate, you can organize other things on it as well. So you can do raffles on it. So if you wanted to raffle off something, it might be one that you might want to look into as well. So it's worth looking into both of them. iDonate as well, they claim to be slightly cheaper than GoFundMe. So both platforms are free to set up and to use. But iDonate claim that they charge less than they charge 1% less than their competitors when it comes to transactions. So for every donation that you get to your page, when that's sent to your bank account, there's a transaction fee. So generally it'll be around 25 cents plus a percentage that they will take. So I think for every €100 I've raised, more than 3% has been taken off of that through GoFundMe. So just to bear in mind that there are fees, they're not huge, but there are some fees from those platforms. So it is worth kind of maybe having a look around as well and just being aware of that when you see the transaction coming into your account and it's not the exact amount. And of course, that'll be reflected in your bank statements as well. Well, I find the GoFundMe very useful because, well, first of all, like you have the list there, it's all public, all the donations are online. Some of them choose not to write their names, and that, that's fine. They can be anonymous. But generally on the back end, you can see who they are, and you can thank everyone through email, through the platform itself. And then, I would encourage people to get their phone numbers if you don't have them, and send a personalized text to thank people as well. But it is a handy way of tracking it, so that you have it all there, and it limits, having to deal with cash donations as well. I suppose one of the things that I found useful is the direct ask. So it's all well and good, setting up a fundraising page, it exists, and you have your target. And I guess when setting your target, you'll need to think of, how much do you need to fundraise? We all know the costs of, the core pack, depending on which level we're going with, is one key cost. So, I mean, you can state that on the page saying, €100 will go towards paying for, X amount of posters, or it'll go towards, online ads, it'll go towards printing leaflets. So you can give some examples. But I think the key thing is, once the page is there, you need to let people know that it's there. So you can share it on your own social media. But also I think direct asks is the way to go. From my experience anyway, just having done a GoFundMe for three elections now, I found that having drawing up a list at the start of your contacts, so friends, family, former colleagues, people in the party, people that you've met who might have given a nice comment saying, best of luck in your election, let me know if I can do anything to help. Draw up an extensive list and think about who you're willing yourself to contact, if you have a good connection. And then you may have your director of elections, or you may have a friend who's willing to make some calls for you. And that's what I've done personally. I've made some texts and calls myself, but my campaign manager has also made some direct asks for me, which has been really invaluable. And I found that most people have been extremely, responsive and will reply to a text if they're sent the link. So I think, it is worth doing that direct ask in order to tell people about it. I suppose the other thing is to decide when you launch your GoFundMe. So, I would advise thinking about payday for people. So obviously we're in the middle of January at the minute. Maybe wouldn't be the most optimum time to launch one. But I think, last Friday of the month is payday for a lot of people. It could be an opportune time to launch it coinciding with a payday, for example. But of course, it'll be up to you to decide when you want to go live with it, when you need the funds as well. I found that most of the people that donated to my online fundraiser have been people that I know, but not everybody has known me personally, so they might have been friends of friends as well. So get to bear that in mind, that not everyone might necessarily know you who is donating. So it is worth, having a blurb. And I know Hannah's put into the chat just a link to my own one, just having a few lines, what you stand for, why you're running, and why you're fundraising, and maybe a link to your social media pages as well, so they can find out more about you as a candidate. So those are kind of some of the key things from me. And I think just in terms of I suppose keeping receipts for everything that you do spend. I find that that's really helpful if you just photograph everything or get the receipts straight away on anything that you do spend out of your account, and it makes it easier then when you're compiling everything at the end of the campaign. You may not be asked for the receipts, but you may be asked for them, so it's always useful. I think I still have receipts from my Shannon election campaigns in 2016 and 2020. Not that I need them now, but I have them there. It's good to keep them. It's good practice to keep them, so you have a full record and transparency of everything that you have spent during the campaign as well. But yeah, I'm happy to take any questions. As I say, it's something that I never would consider myself an expert in, but certainly something I guess I have some experience in because I've had to do it running for election. But I would encourage everyone to run a fundraiser. And I think you'd be surprised by the amount of people that will want to support it as well. So I'll leave it there, if that's okay. Thanks, Hannah.
That's great, Laura. Really, really helpful. And yeah, as Laura mentioned there, I shared hers as an example so that everybody can take a look. I mean, I think a couple of other points that I would mention is, have your photo that's your poster photo on it so that it's the same image across the board. And that's just good practice in communications to have, the same photo across all your social media profiles, but then also on your fundraising piece so that people always see that coherency. I think Laura's point is very well made about drawing up the extensive list and asking someone else to support you in terms of reaching out and sharing the fundraiser, because it's one thing to set it up and then it's another to make sure people get access to it. So thanks very much, Laura. Does anyone have any questions specifically for Laura now, or will we move on to Emer's contribution, and then of course Laura will be available for questions afterwards when we get through the next section. Okay, I'll move to introduce Emer then. So we're delighted to have Emer Costello with us today to contribute to this discussion and training. So Emer, as many of you will know, is a former Dublin City Councillor, Lord Mayor and MEP. So with locals and European elections this year, Emer is very well placed to talk about her experience fundraising as a candidate, but also Emer was for a very long time the go-to fundraising person in Dublin Central, and has a wealth of experience from the constituency perspective. So we're delighted Emer is here to share her experience and some advice and guidance for candidates and constituencies. Over to you, Emer. Thanks very much for being here.
Thanks, Hannah, and thanks a million to Labour Women for the invitation to come along to this. And just at the outset to say good luck to everybody who is a candidate. It's a very daunting task at any time to be a candidate in any election, and it's really brilliant to see so many people there, and it's great that that Labour Women is doing what it is doing to support its candidates. And I'm also a former treasurer of Labour Women, and in my day we raised money and we supported women candidates as well in that capacity as well. I'm a bit worried about what I'm going to say now, just in view of some of what Conor has said. So I might come back with some questions to Conor. But Hannah asked me to have a look at constituency fundraising because I was treasurer of Dublin Central for a good while too. And we had a particular fundraising model in Dublin Central, but I think more importantly, we had quite a strong quite a strong fundraising culture and ethos of solidarity and responsibility towards our candidates. And I think that is something that is hugely important. So in Dublin Central, the tradition had always been that the constituency would be one of the main fundraising bodies, and it wouldn't leave, it wouldn't just set candidates loose to go off and fundraise for themselves with no support from the constituency. And I think that I think that this is a debate maybe that we've had a little bit of a debate on it on the Finance Committee, because I was on the Finance Committee as well. But I think it is something that we as a party, we need to discuss as well. From my perspective, the party is asking people to run. The party selects the candidates. They go through a selection convention. The constituency selects those candidates. And I would see that the constituency has a responsibility and an obligation, both moral and financial, to support to support the candidates that it's selecting and that are flying the flag for the party in the constituency or in the electoral ward. And I think too that no, I'm speaking again from the perspective of Dublin Central, which had a long tradition of fundraising, but I think that the constituency very often has more capacity to be able to fundraise than individuals, and particularly in the run up to local elections. I think candidates have just such a huge amount to do. So making them sort of wholly responsible for funding their own campaign is something that, you know, I feel we as a party we shouldn't be doing, and that we should be saying to the constituencies, you have an obligation to support your candidates. Maybe not everybody will agree with me on this, but that's
I think we've just temporarily lost Emer. Conor, you were a long-standing Dublin Central member. Maybe you can take the mantle while I... Oh, Emer, are you back?
Yeah, I think she's back now.
Great.
We'll just give Emer a minute or two to connect back through.
Yep.
Can you hear us, Emer? I might just go on mute and give Emer a call to just check her connection. And Conor, if you could maybe
hello.
just...
There.
Can you hear us, Emer?
I can, yeah. No, I lost you for a while and then you came back, but you couldn't hear me. So sorry, you can hear me now.
Okay, you're fully
Sorry.
back now.
Okay.
Yeah. So you were just making the point.
I thought
we
maybe
lost
I
you.
had a
Yeah, we lost you just when you were
Go
saying
on.
about the constituency obligation to support the candidate.
Yeah. So I do believe that very strongly. That the constituency has an obligation to support the candidate, that the constituency has more capacity very often than individuals. And it's also a way of rallying support for the members, because it's really important to get the members engaged in an election campaign. And fundraising has to be part of that. And fundraising can bring the members together in a different way. And it's not... So it's making sure that the candidates are supported by the members of the constituency as well, and it does rally the members around the candidate, and it builds a kind of a team spirit. No, I have a few notes here, but they're since when I crashed there, yeah. Okay. So I was going to talk about a few different events that the constituency organised, and you know, like, so why the constituency has the capacity to organise kind of bigger events that can generate significant sums of money. And if a constituency can aim to bring in, you know, kind of between to bring in about 10,000 a year, then, you know, over a kind of a 5-year election cycle, you know, like that's kind of €50,000. But there's kind of local elections and local candidates, and like no doubt within that period there would be a general election as well to be fought. But like to kind of for constituencies to set targets of kind of, you know, somewhere maybe between 8,000 and 10,000 a year that it should be aiming to fundraise into an election account. And to have that pool there to help candidates. So just looking at some of the events that we would do, like in Dublin Central, we have done race nights, but race nights have been really successful for Dublin Central. You can you can make kind of quite substantial sums of money. You can make around kind of €5,000-6,000 on a well-organised race night. The beauty about a race night is that it kind of it brings a lot of kind of different stakeholders together, because on the one hand it rallies the members. All of the members are asked to contribute towards buying a horse, and you can sell horses, you can sell jockeys, and you can sell trainers. So I don't know if you're familiar with the procedure of a race night, but you'd normally have 10 races, 8 horses per race. The races can then have horses, jockeys and trainers. You would charge maybe a tenner. Some constituencies charge more, but a tenner is a good figure. Everybody can sign up to supporting the constituency for a tenner, and you can have horses, jockeys and trainers if you can sell enough. Sometimes you can assign a race to each branch and then ask the branch to kind of deal with its members, and it's a way then of kind of engaging at a branch level as well. The winning horse or jockey would receive a prize, but it wouldn't be a huge prize, you know, like it might be something like a, you know, a bottle of spirits, or it might be a voucher from a local shop or something if you've managed to get a little bit of sponsorship. The last race is normally an auction race, and you can make significant sums on that. Now, normally the proceeds are shared with the winner of the race, but it can yield kind of, you know, a few bob too. But you ask advertisers to take out ads, and you kind of publish a race night program. So there's a huge amount of work. It's very labour intensive from that perspective. But you will make a lot of money on the advertising, and in a sense, you nearly have your money made by selling the horses, and by selling the advertising, you can actually, you know, you can have you can make about 3,000. You know, you could sell about 2.5 to 10 races, 250 in advertising per race, and then 10 races with 8 horses in each. I think I think I worked it out. Well, if you have 9 horses that you're selling, it's around 720 or something. Don't question me on the maths now at the moment, even though I was a treasurer. But so you can have at least 3,000 made before you actually, you know, go to the race night itself, and sometimes you can have more. A good race night will realise considerable funds, but there is a lot of work involved in it, and that's why it's better done at a constituency level and not something that's kind of undertaken by one candidate or one member, because it really is too much. Another kind of fundraiser that we used to do in Dublin Central that was very successful were auction nights, and you would ask people to donate good quality items. Very often this time of the year, we used to do our auction night in January, and we used to do them for after Christmas, when people had lots of unopened and possibly unwanted presents. You know, they could be somebody might have kind of loads of vouchers that they'd be prepared to donate one. Or there might be some collector's items as well, particularly some kind of Labour Party memorabilia or something that would be of interest to that kind of an audience. There's lots of ways now of kind of engaging in auction nights online. We were kind of we didn't do so much of it online, but we kind of advertised some of the items that we had online, and we actually had people from other constituencies saying, I'd be interested in bidding on this particular item or whatever. If you hold the auction in an attractive venue, in a pub or somewhere, it can be a very nice social night as well. You can advertise the event on social media, kind of advertise some of the really lovely items that you will have to auction. And a good auction night can yield about 2,000. I remember one auction night that we had, and it was a long time ago, and it was in the early noughties, if not even before that, and we actually made 4,000 on it. I was absolutely stunned. But it's really good. So the advantage to an auction night is that it's very cost effective. You know, like all items are donated. It's not hugely labour intensive, but it's not like an auction, like a race night. It promotes the circular economy, you can say, by kind of reusing and recycling. It's an enjoyable evening. Maybe do something more with it, like produce a written catalogue and sell advertising on it. But just what you'd need to consider about it is that it does need some effort, and particularly trying to ensure the quality of items that are donated, because you don't want people, it's not a junk sale, and you have to make that very clear. It's not a junk sale. You need to have a good crowd on the night. Like, you need to have a few people who are going to bid against each other. You're going to need to have some high spenders there, and you need to go to kind of prep people up to have, you know, a few people up to have a little bit of a budget to do that. You definitely need to get somebody who's a really good auctioneer to do it, because a good auctioneer will get people will get people going. And we've had some good, and we've had kind of some guest auctioneers and whatever, but you do need to consider who you'll ask to do. And then the other thing is that you need to
Just gonna get.
think we've lost Emer's connection again. Conor, I'm going to come back straight back to you while we wait. And I have a very specific question, and it's about race nights. Oh, Emer.
Hi.
You're back.
Hi. I'm back. Sorry. So yeah, so that's an auction night. It's worth considering, and it is something that a candidate could do on their own as well. But it's a good constituency one, and again, it gets the members going, and it can be a bit of fun. I just said at the end there, just when I was being cut off, just consider kind of what to do with all the stuff that you're left with. I have a garage full of stuff still from Labour Party auctions that nobody bought. So the so other kinds of fundraisers, you can do a sweepstake, and we did some of those during COVID, and we organised that in Microsoft Forms. Like, say, there's the Six Nations coming up, there's the Eurovision coming up, and if anybody wants more information on that, I kind of be happy to talk to any constituency or branch. You won't make huge money; it's a bit of fun, but you could make maybe 500 or 600 euro on it. Other ideas, like have been mentioned already, you can do a table quiz, you can have a party in somebody's house with a, with a collection box, you can have a gathering in a pub, a venue and constituency. Like we did some kind of really interesting raffles, and we had kind of, like then we'd organise an event where we would actually kind of, hold the raffle around Easter or something. Again, all of these are becoming more subject to legislation and regulation than they were back in my day. So that is something to consider. Another thing that the constituency should do is to encourage members to put in standing orders into the constituency, because that's a very efficient way of doing it. We had that with that's still in operation, I think, with Labour Women, that people kind of make standing orders, and I was actually surprised that even how kind of people contributing, lots of people contributing €2 a month was huge, or you can do it kind of €10 twice a year or whatever, and it can be very small amounts, and kind of encourage people to do it and tell them not to worry about it being very small amounts like €2 or whatever. Literally every penny every penny counts. And what we would do in Dublin Central is that we'd say if you have a standing order to the constituency, then you we'll pay your membership for you. Now, Conor might be kind of annoyed with me for vying with central standing orders to the party as well, but that's what I would think. As somebody who has stood for election, I would say I think it is really important to have the support of the constituency. Like when I ran in 2 local elections and the European elections is a completely different kettle of fish. In terms of what you need to do there. But in terms of local elections, it's really good to be able to say to candidates, we can give you one core package, and that the constituencies will say, to start you off, we will make sure that you have one core package, and it gives the candidate kind of just a little bit of a base, a little bit of a mattress there, that that you're going to have a core package, and that you're going to have something basic there, and that you can build on that, and that you can work from that. So I think it's hugely important. I would advise constituencies to hold 2 significant fundraisers in the year, make it clear that it is to assist, the candidates, and to pay whatever other kind of, outgoings that the party has, but it's mostly that. And I think too that it's important that there's good cooperation between the candidates and the constituency, because it is a two-way street. If the constituency is going to fundraise and support the candidate, then it's it wouldn't be right or fair for the candidate to decide to hold a fundraiser the night before a constituency fundraiser, or to be fundraising in competition with a constituency fundraiser. So I think it would be hugely important, or not to go off and organise a race night when the constituency is planning one, and planning on kind of tapping the same pool of donors that the constituency might have. So I think that there is a lot there, but I do think that it is important that constituencies support the candidates. I think it's really good from the point of view of not just financial support, but I think it gives the candidate a strong sense of belonging and a strong sense of loyalty to the constituency and to the party, knowing that they weren't just told to go off and fend for themselves and fund and organise their own campaign. So I'll leave it at that.
That's great, Emer. Thank you so much. That's really valuable overview and some very useful specifics, I think, within that. So to kick off the questions, I have a very specific question, which both times you dropped off, I was going to make Conor answer, but he's escaped, and it's about race nights. So for people who have never been at a race night, on the night, how do the races work? How does that function?
Sorry, Hannah, my connection, and I've just come off another meeting which was on Teams earlier, and I didn't have this issue that I'm having now, but you're breaking up a little bit. I think you're saying, how are the races organised on the night? So the you can buy a package, and again, you see, because I think that like technology has advanced so much as well, that like what we have is that there used to be a place in Liffey Street, and I know that there are places that do sell these packages. So we have a whole garage full of race night tickets. If anybody is ever interested in doing it, I think just give me a shout and see, because I'm sure even if Dublin Central was to do one, we'd still have a few there. But you can have you have a ticket for each race, so you have a different slip for each race, and the race night company normally provides that with the races. So race 1, you will have tickets, horses 1 to 8. So you need a few volunteers to set. So when you start off on the night, you would set up your tables, and you would have kind of tellers who would sell the tickets. So somebody might come up, it's a bit like going to the tote at the race course and say, I want to put €2 on horse number 1, or I want to put €1 on horse number 2. And the bets are normally that small, you know, like they're like say would be €1 or €2. Keep it small, because people can come up then and they can put €5 on. But it's not really to get people gambling, and you can spend, even on €1 and €2 bets, you can spend quite a considerable amount of money in the course of the evening. So keep the tickets fairly small. At the end of the day, at the end of the race, then you can start the second race and calculate the odds on the first race. And normally then you see, like say, if horse number 1 won and only one person bet on it, and you took in €40 on the race, you could be quite generous, and you could say, we'll give 15, €20 to the winner, and we'll say, you know, the odds were 20 to 1 on that race. And of course it encourages everybody to bet on the next race. If only one person has bet on it. If kind of 4 or 5 people bet on the same horse, then you divide it up, and you might say, you know, like we took in €40, €50 on that race, and so we have 5 winners. So we couldn't afford to give a tenner each to everybody. So we'll give them kind of €2 each, and we say the odds are 2 to 1, and you give back a tenner, or you can make the odds 3 to 1, depending on how generous you're feeling. So, but you need a little bit of time to calculate, you know, like what you think the best odds will be, and it will always depend. It's not like the races where you're kind of going on the odds of the horse. You calculate the winnings on the basis of the bids that came in, the odds that came in. And then the auction race is something then that it can be a bit of fun. You can either ask people to buy the horses blind, you know, without the little introduction that kind of introduces all the horses and says, you know, like this horse isn't at the races, because sometimes the auctioneer will come on and say something like that, but like that could still easily be the horse that will win. You never really know with those little commentaries that come in before, but you can sell them blind, and you can sell the auction race. And normally what you would do then is that you would give half the say somebody bought a horse for €200, like you might have people buying a horse for €100 or €200. The winning horse of that race would win €50 if it was 100, and people can still bet on the auction race as per normal. Does that make sense?
Okay, great. Yeah. There's a lot to it, as you said.
But happy to talk to somebody. Yeah. Happy
exactly.
to talk to constituency or to somebody who wants to do it.
Yeah, that I think that's a really, really welcome offer, Emer, because I'd say if somebody did want to put something like that together, they'd be best off going to you for a bit of a one-on-one tutorial.
Yeah.
I did actually also want to
Yeah.
come back on the point you made about the standing orders. I mean, Labour women do still benefit from those standing orders, and you're very, you're totally correct. They really do add up, and they're very useful. Does anyone have any questions for Emer or now for any of our speakers? There's a couple of minutes now for questions, and everyone has very generously offered to answer questions, follow up if anyone has any. But now is a good time. For those of you who joined us a little late, we are recording this event so that you can watch back and use it as a resource, and we'll be sharing it with people who registered but weren't able to make it. We also have a couple of, so far we have 2 written Labour women guides. One is a guide to organising a fundraiser, and one is a guide to online fundraising. And we might update them a little bit after today with some of the information shared, and then recirculate them. And throughout the months in the lead up to the elections, we'll be creating more of these Labour women guides for our candidates, so that you always have a handy A4 to print off and consult if necessary at a time when you can't get in touch with anybody. Any questions? I'm just going to pause now in case anyone has a light bulb moment.
Hannah, it's Conor. Will Conor circulate notes that he has after this?
Yes,
Perfect.
we have Conor's. We have
Perfect.
Conor's note, and Samira, our Labour Women Officer, will circulate that to everybody who registered. Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect.
And if you don't get it, just email women@labour.ie, and we'll make sure you get it then. Emer, go ahead.
Hannah, I have a question for Conor if nobody else has a question at the moment.
Go for it.
Hello?
Yeah, Emer, go ahead.
Hello, Hannah, can you hear me?
We can, yeah, we can hear you, Emer. Can you hear us? You can go ahead and ask your question to Conor.
Right, okay, sorry, thanks. I wasn't sure if you can hear me, and apologies again about my connection. Conor, just like we would always propose that the constituency would buy a core package for a candidate. Now, I came in sort of as you were delivering your intervention, and so I just wanted to clarify that if the constituency buys a core pack, like, and I would always recommend that the constituency would provide money, or wouldn't provide financial assistance as such, but would provide kind of benefit in kind. So like it would buy posters, or it would buy leaflets, or buy core package. But if the constituency buys the core package, are you saying that that comes from the party's allocation as opposed to the candidate's allocation? Because I think maybe we did it wrongly before, but like we would have actually considered that within the candidate allocation, because the party allocation was what head office spent on the national advertising spend and the party leader posters and all of that. So is it then that the constituency spend goes into the party allocation, and that's the head office allocation?
So there isn't a clear answer to that, because the way the law works is it defines candidate and party. And what you identify there correctly is in fact a tripartite arrangement. There's the candidate, there's the constituency, which is its own separate accounting unit, for example, under SIPO, which I know SIPO don't have a role here in the local elections, but SIPO consider your local, your constituency, or sometimes even a branch if it operates very independently, but we'll say constituency as a unit, and then there's the party, which is a separate unit. So for example, by the 31st of January every year, or thereabouts, the party and every active constituency has to make separate returns to SIPO. So there's a grey area there. So the local election law refers to candidates and refers to the party. And it isn't clear to me that there's a distinction there between the constituency party and the national party. And given the way that's framed, I would say the candidate is the individual and anybody else is the party. And I think, therefore, that when the constituency is buying from the core package from head office, it's kind of in legal terms buying it from itself. And it is the party providing that money's worth of support to the candidate. You're absolutely right. Don't give cash donations to the candidate. Buy something. But that's a part then that I think would have to be allocated from the candidate to the party. I think, Emer. But by the way, like there isn't a hard and fast rule on that, because there isn't that definition of candidate, local party, national party.
Okay, because I think in previous and because like kind of having been a candidate, having been election agent and whatever, I think like we always took the constituency spend as part of the candidate spend, because it was kind of, you know, coming from the constituency, and the party spend.
Yeah.
So like it might be just
by
no
the way,
harm
that
to
may not be
clarify
wrong, by the
that
way.
with head office.
Mm.
And yeah, but I'm just saying it might be no harm to clarify that with head office, because if head office, you know, like if head office is advising that that spend is allocated to the party spend, then there needs to be an agreement between the party and the constituency. Because my understanding was that head office filled out its own returns, and that they had a certain threshold, and they were taking they were taking a certain threshold from that, you see. So and
the default is
that was the
10%.
issue, that you see, that head office had hit threshold and that the candidate had its threshold. So anyway, it may be worth clarifying, or maybe just let people continue as they are and maybe not ask any questions. Maybe sometimes it's easier not to ask.
Well, the default is 10% of the divide, as you know yourself, in any case, under law. But you're right.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it is a grey area, and you've raised a legitimate question, Emer.
Thanks. It's always useful to hear people teasing these things out. I think you learn an awful lot by listening in. Helen?
No, just, and I think Emer said it already. Like if the core package is allocated to party HQ, well, then that's more than 10% of what's of a candidate spend. So there has to be an agreement. There has to be a signed agreement. Yeah, no, that's grand.
Right. I'll tell you what, I'll go back to Billy and see what she thinks about that as well, about whether they consider that to be local. But the problem is that 2009 Act defines it as candidate versus party and doesn't give a role to constituency as such.
Can I ask Conor, would it be possible to do up templates of these signed agreements for people?
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
might
sure,
be
good.
really useful to be able to circulate to candidates and constituencies, so that they know what they need to be including.
Sure.
Great.
I'll talk to Billy about that. No, absolutely no problem.
Great, thank you. Okay, well, before we wrap up, just one point. I mentioned at the offset the Labour Women Candidate Support Fund. So we will be communicating about that to all our members in the coming weeks. And there will be a process for submitting to receive support from Labour Women. And at the same time, we'll also be putting out a drive to all our members to support Labour Women's funds, so that we can in turn support female candidates. And I'll just hand over to Samira, who of course is our wonderful staff officer supporting all of Labour Women and all the party sections activities. So a busy year ahead. Samira?
Sorry, there was just one question that Ellen put in the chat box. She says, if people wanted to set up a standing orders to Labour Women, how would they go about it? If anyone...
That's a great question. And what we'll do is we will put the answer to that in our email, because I have to double check a couple of things on that before answering accurately. But we will put all of that into an email and follow up, so that everybody has the information.
Perfect. I just wanted to say that I will send the resource pack after the meeting is done, and we're always here to help. So please do reach out either to me or anyone else at head office, and Hannah, obviously. And a great election year. So best of luck to everyone. Thank you.
Yes, thanks so much, everybody, for attending on a Friday afternoon in grey January. Thank you very much to our speakers for their insights. Best of luck to everybody who's running, and watch the emails coming in from Labour Women and our social media accounts as well. As I said, at the offset, we're hoping to host a number of these Suffragette School trainings in the next 2 months. So as to keep delivering information and providing this space, I think, to ask questions, because the party is running its own campaign school, which is of course really valuable to candidates, but we want to keep going with this space for Labour women members to be able to ask questions openly and tease out complexities to issues that they might be asking themselves when, you know, there are other people in our network who can answer them. So thanks very much to everybody. Have a great afternoon and a lovely weekend. Take care. Thanks so much.